This is a U.S. war of choice. President Trump singularly chose the timing, the extent.
Why would an American president do that, which is forcing gas prices to hike right here going into spring break?
What matters more, fighting meaningless wars abroad for oil or facing the crisis destroying communities at home? We already know what the U.S. has chosen, and it is precisely this decision to channel immense effort and resources into weapons and military power that, perhaps unintentionally, pushed millions of people experiencing homelessness across the nation into conditions with little hope of escape.
It's a shame. The world is looking at it. Look at Los Angeles with the tents and the horrible, horrible, disgusting conditions. Look at San Francisco.
It feels like a failure. I failed hard in some areas of my life.
Nowhere is this reality more visible than in Los Angeles. So, what is truly happening within this homelessness crisis? Let us take a closer look at the forces shaping the quiet unraveling of the so-called City of Angels. Los Angeles, the U.S. Zombieland in real life. As the largest city in California and widely recognized as the entertainment capital of the world, Los Angeles has long been a destination for hundreds of thousands of immigrants chasing the promise of wealth and opportunity. And in many ways, that promise still exists. According to the latest data from 2023, the average annual income per capita in Los Angeles is around $90,000, significantly higher than the national average of roughly $80,000, and projections suggest it may continue to rise much more this year. However, beneath that image of prosperity lies a stark and uncomfortable contrast. In the very same city where wealth continues to accumulate, nearly 75,000 people are experiencing homelessness, struggling each day with basic survival, often without even a single dollar to their name. The gap between those who have and those who have not has become increasingly visible, shaping a reality that is difficult to ignore. In fact, the number of people without stable housing in Los Angeles may not stop at 75,000. This figure comes from what is known as the point-in-time count, or pit count, which primarily records individuals living on the streets during a single night. It does not fully account for those living in RVs, makeshift shelters, abandoned structures, or even underground systems where visibility is low and oversight is limited. You know, I didn't exaggerate. That's what really going on in LA right now, especially after the immigrant deportation in the middle of 2025. The result is, many researchers and observers have begun referring to Los Angeles with a phrase that, while informal, captures the scale of the issue, the capital of America's homelessness crisis. And perhaps what makes this situation even more complex is not just the number itself, but the way it exists alongside immense economic power. At the same time, another layer of the crisis has been unfolding quietly but persistently: the rise of fentanyl and its growing presence on the streets. Unlike earlier waves of substance use, fentanyl has introduced a different dynamic, one that often appears less visible yet more disruptive. Its effects can slow movement, alter awareness, and create a sense of detachment that is difficult to fully comprehend from the outside. In certain neighborhoods, this reality becomes part of the everyday landscape. Individuals may stand for long periods, move gradually, or seem disconnected from their surroundings. These moments are not always dramatic, but they leave a lasting impression, subtle shifts that reflect deeper struggles beneath the surface. The intersection between homelessness and substance use has made the situation even more complex. Not everyone experiencing homelessness is affected by addiction, but for some, the presence of fentanyl has made it harder to navigate an already unstable life. There goes a cycle that is difficult to break, where housing instability and substance use reinforce one another over time. And in these overlapping realities, economic strength, visible inequality, and the quiet spread of a powerful substance, a broader picture begins to take shape. One that raises a question not only about Los Angeles, but about the systems surrounding it, and how such conditions continue to exist side by side. Being homeless is their choice. I've heard that statement more times than I can count. But the reality behind the homelessness crisis is far more complex than that. There are countless factors contributing to it, and in a place like Los Angeles, where economic instability continues to shape daily life, even someone with a steady job and a stable income can find themselves slipping into extreme housing insecurity. For many, the path does not begin with a single decision, but with a gradual series of setbacks. A sudden rent increase, a medical emergency, a job loss that lasts longer than expected. These moments, taken individually, may seem manageable, but together they can quietly erode a person's stability over time. And in a city where the cost of living continues to rise, the margin for error becomes increasingly narrow. Housing, in particular, plays a central role. Los Angeles has some of the highest rental prices in the United States, while the supply of affordable housing remains limited. As a result, many individuals and families spend a large portion of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. And when that balance is disrupted, even briefly, the consequences can be immediate. Eviction, temporary displacement, and eventually, life on the street. At that point, broader economic pressures continue to shape the landscape. Wages do not always keep pace with inflation. Stable employment has become harder to maintain in certain sectors. And for those already living close to the edge, these shifts can make recovery increasingly difficult. What once might have been a temporary setback can evolve into something far more permanent. Elsewhere, the systems designed to provide support often struggle to meet the scale of the need. Access to affordable housing programs, mental health services, and financial assistance can be limited, fragmented, or difficult to navigate. For some, help arrives too late. For others, it remains out of reach altogether. And so, the idea that homelessness is simply a matter of choice begins to feel incomplete. Because behind each story, there is often a combination of circumstances, economic, structural, and personal, that converge over time. Perhaps the more difficult question is not why some individuals become homeless, but how many others remain just one step away from the same reality. Substance use has become an undeniable part of the homelessness crisis in Los Angeles, but it is important to understand that it is only one part of a much larger picture. Not everyone experiencing homelessness struggles with addiction. However, for a significant portion, substance use can both contribute to and intensify the instability of life on the streets. Among those homeless people, about 30 to 35% are believed to struggle with substance use disorders. This means that tens of thousands of individuals are navigating both housing instability and addiction at the same time. One of the substances most frequently discussed today, fentanyl, which has emerged as the most concerning. It is a synthetic opioid, far more potent than many drugs that came before it, and its presence has reshaped the landscape of addiction in ways that are not always immediately visible. Its effects are often subtle, slower movements, delayed reactions, a sense of detachment that can make individuals appear distant from their surroundings. Over time, this disconnection can make daily survival even more difficult, especially in an environment that already demands constant awareness. Within this context, there have been growing concerns about other dangerous substances entering public discussion, including a drug often referred to as crocodile. While its presence in the United States remains far less widespread and less clearly documented than fentanyl, it is frequently cited as an example of how substance use can evolve in unpredictable and harmful ways. Its reputation alone reflects a broader fear that new substances may continue to emerge, each carrying their own risks and challenges. And yet, focusing only on the substances themselves can sometimes obscure the deeper reality. Addiction does not exist in isolation. It often intersects with housing instability, mental health challenges, and economic hardship, forming a cycle that is difficult to break once it begins. For individuals already living without stable shelter, these factors can reinforce one another, creating conditions where recovery becomes increasingly complex. To all the audience who's watching, I want to clarify that this discussion is not intended to direct attention toward negative imagery or to sensationalize the issue. Rather, the purpose is to provide context and understanding. By looking more closely at how substance use interacts with homelessness, we begin to see a more complete picture, one that goes beyond assumptions and moves toward awareness. I guess I'll need to say thank you to all the volunteers dedicating their time for homelessness support in LA First. In such a vast and complex city, the social support system plays a critical role in responding to homelessness. Over the years, local and state authorities have introduced a range of programs aimed at providing temporary shelter, mental health services, and pathways toward more stable housing. Initiatives such as emergency shelters, transitional housing, and permanent supportive housing have been developed to address different stages of homelessness. However, access to these services is not always straightforward. Demand often exceeds available resources, and waiting lists for housing assistance can be long. For many individuals, navigating the system itself can be a challenge, especially without stable access to communication, transportation, or documentation. What exists on paper as a structured network of support can feel fragmented in practice. At the same time, outreach teams work across the city, connecting with people living on the streets, offering basic medical care, counseling, and referrals to available programs. These efforts have helped some individuals move into more stable conditions, yet the scale of the crisis means that progress is often gradual and not always visible from the outside. Funding also plays a significant role. Large sums have been allocated toward addressing homelessness in Los Angeles, reflecting both the urgency of the issue and the complexity of solving it. However, questions remain about efficiency, coordination, and long-term impact. Building housing takes time, and support systems require consistent investment to remain effective. In the end, the social support system in Los Angeles represents both effort and limitation. It reflects a city attempting to respond to a growing challenge while also revealing how difficult it can be to align resources, policy, and human needs within a system under constant pressure. A question of responsibility. When looking at the homelessness crisis in Los Angeles, it is difficult to place responsibility on a single cause or a single group. The reality is more layered and at times uncomfortable to confront. There are cases, though not the majority, where some individuals appear to embrace a way of life that exists outside conventional structure. A life without fixed rules, without consistent obligations, and in some instances, without clear regard for public order. They are people who live a life where they are free to sleep wherever they want, smoke everything without being caught, and they don't have to work 9 to 5 to make money. On the other hand, public policy has not escaped scrutiny. Decisions made at both federal and state levels have shaped the trajectory of this crisis over time. Policies associated with figures such as Donald Trump and Gavin Newsom have, in different ways, sparked debate among residents, some viewing them as necessary responses, others as incomplete or misaligned with the realities on the ground. These disagreements reflect a broader uncertainty about what effective solutions should look like and how they should be implemented. The recent decision to invest hundreds of billions into a war in Iran under Trump's leadership may place the U.S. economy under temporary strain. I believe that. Personally, I hope those watching this video will take the time to prepare carefully and think ahead for what may come. Because whether we notice it immediately or not, the financial impact tends to reach further than expected, and the taxes people are asked to carry in the near future could rise significantly, perhaps even beyond what many anticipate. And then there is the question of resources. Significant funding has been directed toward addressing homelessness in Los Angeles, yet the visible impact often feels uneven. As new buildings rise, some for community use, others reflecting broader urban development, questions naturally emerge about priorities. How resources are allocated, what is considered essential, and what might be seen as excessive or symbolic rather than practical. In the end, the situation does not point to a single point of failure, but rather to a convergence of choices, systems, and outcomes. And perhaps the more pressing reflection is not simply who is responsible, but how responsibility is understood in a city where so many different realities exist side by side. There was a time, particularly in the early 2000s, when homelessness in Los Angeles felt like something more contained. Visible, yes, but not as deeply woven into the everyday fabric of the city. It existed in certain areas, often spoken about in distance, as if it were separate from the broader rhythm of urban life. Today, that distance feels a bit smaller. What has changed is not only the scale, but the visibility and the complexity. The presence of homelessness is no longer confined to specific neighborhoods. It appears in places where it once felt unexpected, near commercial centers, along major streets, even in areas associated with growth and development. And with that visibility comes a shift in perception. It becomes harder to look away, harder to treat it as an isolated issue. And the conversation itself has evolved. It is no longer only about housing or only about individual circumstances. It reflects a wider intersection of economic pressure, public health, and social structure. And perhaps what feels most different now is the sense that this is no longer a temporary phase, but a condition that has settled into the city in a more permanent way. Los Angeles tells a story that goes beyond a single city. It reflects a broader question about how modern societies respond to imbalance between wealth and vulnerability, growth and stability. The answers are not simple, and they may not arrive quickly. But within that complexity lies an opportunity to look more closely, to understand more deeply, and perhaps to rethink what it means to build a city where no one is left entirely behind.